The 2006 Dominion Camp Meeting Kiss, a public display of a disturbing relationship. One of the most shocking and bizarre revelations discussed in this episode was the deeply inappropriate interaction between Rod Parsley and his daughter Ashton at the 2006 Dominion Camp Meeting. There is actual footage of this. It's not speculation. It's not hearsay. It's on video. In front of a massive crowd, Rod Parsley told his then 17-year-old daughter Ashton, "Come here and give Daddy a kiss." Not once, but twice.
Absolutely wonderful. Daddy.
And I don't know if you heard the audio. I couldn't really hear it on my end very well, but what he said, he says something twice to Ashton. He says, "Come here and kiss Daddy. Come here and kiss Daddy."
Absolutely wonderful. Daddy.
Let's be perfectly clear. There is nothing normal about this. A grown man, her father, a supposed man of God, demanding a public kiss from his teenage daughter in the middle of a church service is beyond disturbing. It's bizarre. It's unsettling. It speaks to a deeper sickness within that family dynamic that goes far beyond just this moment. And now, with all the other allegations coming to light about the Parsley family, allegations of inappropriate relationships, abuse of power, and the grotesque idolization of their inner circle, it's impossible to ignore the patterns. What was brushed off as just a weird moment back in 2006 now looks like an ominous symptom of a much larger, much darker reality.
Everything you're about to hear is just my assessment. It's my opinion, and not to be taken as fact.
A thorough and condemning assessment of Rod Parsley's family optics, the sidelined wife and the exalted daughter. When the camera captured Rod Parsley seated with his wife Joni and his daughter Ashton, it did far more than freeze a family moment. It crystallized in one snapshot the hypocrisy, dysfunction, and misplaced affections that have long plagued Parsley's ministry and family life. For years, Rod has trumpeted family values and biblical order from the pulpit. But this picture betrays him. A man who beams toward his daughter, embraces her in warmth, while his wife sits stiff, sidelined, and reduced to an accessory. This may look innocent to the untrained eye, but when assessed through the lens of Scripture and human behavior, it becomes damning evidence of what many have suspected all along. Rod Parsley has failed in the most basic covenantal duty of a husband, to cherish, prioritize, and visibly honor his wife above all others. Instead, Ashton is exalted, Joni is diminished, and Rod is exposed. 1. The husband's first duty to his wife, not his daughter. Scripture leaves no ambiguity. A husband's first earthly responsibility is to his wife. Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Genesis 2:24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Rod's body language, however, says something else entirely. He leans toward Ashton, arm around her shoulders, face lit with a broad grin. His warmth flows toward his daughter, not his wife. Joni, the covenant partner, sits on the end, physically separated and emotionally disengaged. This is more than awkward optics. It's a violation of biblical order. A father may love his daughter deeply, but his primary affection, embrace, and cleaving must belong to his wife. When that affection is publicly displaced, the marriage covenant is dishonored. 2. The exaltation of Ashton, legacy over covenant. Why is Ashton in the middle, while Joni sits on the side? Because in Rod Parsley's world, Ashton is the centerpiece. She is not just a daughter, she is his spiritual heir, his anointed successor, the one he parades before congregations and platforms. Rod's fixation on Ashton as his legacy has become so obsessive that it borders on idolatry. She is showcased, exalted, and placed in the emotional and symbolic position that rightly belongs to his wife. Colossians 3:21 warns fathers, "Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged." One way to discourage children is to burden them with misplaced roles. Ashton has been thrust into the spotlight as both daughter and successor, forced to carry the weight of her father's ministry ambitions. What we see in this photo is not a father simply supporting his daughter. We see a father publicly enthroning her as the center of his emotional world, while his wife is diminished. 3. The sidelining of Joni, a wife, made an ornament. Joni Parsley's posture in this photo is telling. She sits rigidly, clutching a Bible or book in her lap, with a polite but subdued expression. While Rod beams toward Ashton, Joni looks like an afterthought. This is the tragedy of many ministry wives. They become props. They are paraded when convenient, silenced when not, and reduced to pastor's wife instead of honored as covenant partners. Proverbs 31:11-12. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. A Proverbs 31 wife is meant to be trusted, honored, and cherished. But Joni, in this optic, is neither honored nor cherished. She is sidelined. The fact that she sits holding scripture while her husband's body and attention lean elsewhere adds bitter irony. She embodies quiet dignity, but her husband denies her public affection and honor. 4. Hypocrisy in leadership, preaching. What he doesn't live. Rod Parsley has spent decades proclaiming family values and biblical order. Yet this photo undermines his entire ministry narrative. Leadership is not measured by sermons, but by lived example. One that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? By these standards, Rod is disqualified. He has not ruled his house well. Instead of showcasing covenant order, he parades dysfunction. A wife sidelined, a daughter exalted, and a husband smiling in hypocrisy. The optics of this picture are damning because they expose what sermons cannot cover, a failure to live what is preached. 5. The psychology of dysfunction, misplaced affection and control. From a psychological perspective, Rod's behavior reveals deep dysfunction. Emotional misplacement. He channels the warmth meant for Joni into Ashton, effectively making his daughter the emotional centerpiece of his family dynamic. Control through spotlight. By enthroning Ashton publicly, he keeps her tethered to his ministry empire, ensuring his legacy continues. Suppression of the wife. Joni's muted presence demonstrates a relationship where the wife has been emotionally muted and overshadowed by both her husband and daughter. This is not the picture of a healthy family, but of a man obsessed with control and image, even at the expense of biblical covenant and emotional balance. 6. The scriptural condemnation of hypocrisy. Jesus reserved his harshest words for religious hypocrites, those who preached one thing but lived another. Matthew 23:27-28. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness. Rod's outward family picture may look like unity to some, but the underlying imbalance exposes hypocrisy and dysfunction. James 1:22. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Rod is not a doer of the word he preaches. He deceives himself and others with an image of family order while living in contradiction to it. Final condemnation. This single photo encapsulates the collapse of Rod Parsley's credibility as a husband, father, and pastor. Rod dishonors Joni by failing to embrace and prioritize her publicly. He exalts Ashton into a role she was never biblically meant to occupy: centerpiece, successor, an emotional replacement for his wife. He models hypocrisy by preaching family order while embodying dysfunction. He violates scripture by displacing covenantal love for misplaced affection. Rod, Joni, and Ashton each represent something in this photo. Rod, the smiling hypocrite, presenting warmth while modeling dysfunction. Joni, the sidelined wife, dignified yet dishonored, clutching scripture while being emotionally displaced. Ashton, the exalted daughter, burdened with the role of spiritual heir, sitting in a place that dishonors her mother and exposes her father's misplacement of affection. This is not a picture of biblical family order. It is a portrait of dysfunction, hypocrisy, and legacy idolatry. Rod Parsley, once again, has been exposed, not by his critics, but by his own optics.